everyone, and welcome to week 2 of your poetry class with me, Irish Jamal Dunkel. How did that first lesson go? I hope you wrote something that surprised you, and I can't wait to read all of your poems. I'll be giving you a little feedback on your poems in Google Docs, so look for my comments coming soon. This is our second lesson, and it's called Two Sides of History. History can be told in many different directions. It can be told from the perspective of the people who arrived in ships, who settled the new land, right? And it can be told from the perspective of the people who lived on that land for centuries before those people arrived. The origin stories for our county offer a wealth of information and a really great way for us to think about the two sides of history. For today's poem, you're going to write a persona poem. So a persona poem is where you take on the role of being someone else besides yourself. It's a poem written from the perspective of someone or something besides yourself. In the poem, you're going to choose either to be a Coast Miwok standing on the cliffs on the day that the first big ships arrived, or you will be someone in those big ships that has been at sea for months and months and is finally arriving to Bodega Bay. Now, when you write this, the thing we're going to be working on this week is a little bit different. Last week we worked on sound. This week we're going to be writing about using sensory detail. So sensory detail is what you can see, what you can hear, what you can taste, what you can smell, and what you can feel, okay? And the more of that you add into your writing, the more the reader will feel a visceral connection, a connection in their body to what you are writing. So I want you to think about, I'm going to read you two poems first to give you an introduction. These are two poems from my book, Ghost. There's a Ghost in This Machine of Air, which is a poem I wrote about the history of Sonoma County when I was Poet Laureate of Sonoma County many years ago. So the first poem is told from the perspective of the Coast Miwok people, and it's called A Language is a Map of Our Failures. At first, the land was covered in thick redwoods. Their dizzying tops spindled the wool of low fog. They lived in open meadows between trees, close enough to the sea to dream of salt and the muscular bodies of fish. The smoke that rose from the cochas was thick with oil, but the scents still wove together: fog's breath, rosemary, the burning of wood. The oldest ship appeared out of the fog like a hollow wooden whale on the blue horizon. Then two smaller wooden boats skated toward shore. No fear drifted on the slack winds, even though this was a day when change would begin to rise, ash-like, into the air, catching and burning in the branches of the tall trees. The map would show memory's retreat as it bled further and further inland, rocky sand to cliff to the high meadows where the trees had begun to fall. There would be many more ships. There would be much forgetting until the towns came, a small dry goods store, then a livery and a blacksmith. It was after all of that the history was recorded, and it was without what had been lost to air, to the eaves of trees. So this poem gives you the perspective of what it might be like in Bodega Bay, in the Coast Miwok communities before contact, before these big ships come, when they're still living in their cochas. The cochas are the structures made out of redwood bark that the Coast Miwok live in, or used to live in. And what it was like to see a giant ship on the horizon. They had never seen something like that. And so that's why I use the idea of a hollow wooden whale, right? Because it's the biggest thing that they've seen on the water. Now, the other perspective is the perspective of the people in those tall ships. And I want you to think about these ships have been traveling for years at a time. That means the people on board had not had fresh food except for what had, they'd been able to catch in the sea for many, many months. And the ships they smelled like mildew and wood, and it wasn't a very clean environment. The people on the ships had been wearing oftentimes the same clothes that they'd been wearing for over a year, so they're falling off, and they're so sick of each other. I mean, imagine being with even your best friends on a tiny on a boat for like a year. That's a long time, right? So I want you to think about all of the feelings they would have when they finally, after all that time, see land, see the thing they've been searching for. So this is my interpretation of that, and it's called Geography as Seen from the Tall Ships. From lull of dank, wet wood and passage, too many bodies pressed together, our clothes bleached and worn thin from sun's glare and wind's incessant blowing. From the sway that had pooled and gathered in us like a brackish bilge until we were unable to understand land, that line of shore defining an end. Then from it, the green hills pouring back into what we were meant to discover. From the weak legs that strode from the small boat into icy surf came uncertainty and doubt. The weight of cargo carried across, then dragged off the ship and over the grassy dunes to the waiting wagons. There were no maps. There were only ideas and a strange man standing by the wagons. Still wet, we gathered again close, but far away from what we knew of ourselves in the rough wood cabs. Two rutted tracks leading a dusty path out from months of salt and sway over the roll of hills. So, your job today is to think about using sensory detail. You're going to choose one of these perspectives. You're either going to be a coast Miwok, seeing these ships come in on that first day. You can be anyone in the village. You don't have to be, you can be someone your age in the village, or you can be an old man, or you can be anyone. And I want you to think about, or you can be someone in the boats, and same thing, you can choose who you're going to be, because remember, this is a persona poem. You get to be whoever you want. So I want you to think about, if you're doing the ship, what did it look like inside the ship? Was it dark? Was there light? Or what did it look like in the Coast Miwok village, which was up on the hills, on the cliffs above Bodega Bay? Or on the shore, on the sand. Maybe they were down on the shore when the boats arrived. What did it smell like at the village? Could you smell the wood smoke, the dried fish, the dried berries, the salt in the air from the ocean? What did it smell like inside those ships, right? Where people had been living in a very small space for months. Did it smell like wood or mold? Could you smell the ocean? What did it feel like to touch your feet on land after so many months at sea? Remember, have you ever been on a boat and then you get on land and you're still kind of rocking, right? Think about what that feels like after a year at sea. How did it feel to run barefoot down to the ships from your village? How did the cool fog feel, or the hot sun? What sounds did you hear? Did you hear oars in the water as you were going from the big ship into the rowboats, into the beaches? Could you hear the voices of other concerned villagers when they saw the ships? Or could you hear the chanting of a song? Then I want you to use a metaphor or a simile. And that's when, like, I use the hollow whale, right, as a way to describe the ship. I want you to think about, if you're writing from the Coast Miwok perspective, when the Coast Miwok try and describe the ship, something they have never seen before, How do they find language to describe it? They can't say ship because they don't have that word. And how did the people who got off the boats describe the Coast Miwok people who looked very different from themselves? What else do you want the reader to feel when they're reading your poem? All right, guys, get to it. I can't wait to read your poems. Have a great week.